This is the Course of Action podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, and your favorite platform worldwide. You can also stream new episodes on the Reeves Across America radio network every Monday at noon Eastern. Reeves Across America's mission is to remember the fallen, honor those who serve, and teach future generations the value of freedom. All right, guys, welcome back to Course of Action. Tonight, I have a guest who is a Miami native and a 27-year veteran of the South Florida Police Law Enforcement Agency and an undercover detective, which we're going to get into. It's Michael Hearns. How are you?
Jeff, how are you? So good to see you.
I'm good. Thank you for doing this. I'm looking forward to picking your brain. I've been having some different law enforcement guys on lately and hearing some really cool stories from the Beverly Hills and Hollywood to Joint Task Force and now, Miami law enforcement official, which is unique because you see Miami in a lot of movies and a lot of undercover stuff and, cocaine and drug trade and this and that. So I'm looking forward to saying that, how much of that is truth or fiction made out of Hollywood?
Yeah, there's a lot of mystique about Miami, and it truthfully is a dropping off point for the U.S. And we used to jokingly say that we invent crime in Miami and that we should probably trademark it the way we do it. It really is a different segmentation of law enforcement. You need to be very versed in so many different things to include understanding Santeria, understanding geopolitical situations, understanding a lot of things that oftentimes don't affect other parts of the country.
So when did you join the Miami police force?
Actually, I joined the Coral Gables Police Department, which is a municipality in Miami. Miami has 26 different municipalities, and people oftentimes don't recognize that Miami-Dade County, which the city of Miami sits in, is bigger in geography and in population than the state of Rhode Island. So wow. Coral Gables encompasses one of the larger municipalities. Us in Miami Beach and Miami are probably the top three in there. And I joined in 1988.
Wow. So did you always want to be in law enforcement, or how did that kind of start off for you?
Actually, no. My initial love of my life was advertising and marketing, and I worked in aviation, advertising and marketing for a lot of the larger airlines. And then when deregulation came around in the mid to early 1980s, there was a lot of downsizing and a lot of layoffs, and I just needed and wanted a recession-proof job. Then I applied at the U.S. Customs Service through the Treasury Enforcement Agency agent test, and I applied at the City of Miami and Coral Gables, and luckily all three hired me. And I could never answer the question why, but I chose Coral Gables over the three, and that's where I ended up.
How long did it take you to make detective?
My career path is probably not normal for most people. I did my requisite time in the police academy. I did my 3 months of field trained officer training. I did 1 day in uniform, and then I got put into a street crime suppression group working in the city of Miami because the city of Miami had some undercovers that were getting burned. And I think the agency in the department felt I had an aptitude for this, so immediately got put into plainclothes narcotics. Came back to the road like 8 months later, did about a month, and then I got put into vice narcotics. Wow. And I did that for about 10 years.
So what is vice narcotics exactly?
If you remember the TV show Miami Vice, we are definitely the real version of that TV show. Vice Intelligence and Narcotics, the VIN unit. We dealt mostly with drug trafficking. It says vice, but there wasn't all that much gambling or anything that we had to deal with. It was mostly large-scale cocaine trafficking and money laundering cases.
Is money laundering as frequent of a thing as we see in the media and in movies and all that? Is there really all that dirty money going around there, switching hands, rolling around on the money counters like we see in Hollywood?
Yeah. Hollywood is just finally starting to understand the back end of the equation. Cocaine, for all intents and purposes, grows on a cocoa bush. And when you seize kilograms of cocaine, all the cocaine trafficker needs to do is go back to the bush and pull more leaves and process the leaves into coca. Money doesn't grow on trees, unfortunately. And the reason why people oftentimes get killed for cocaine is not because cocaine is valuable, it's because the money it generates is valued. The cocaine money equation runs on a 3-to-1 ratio. 1 kilogram of cocaine will generate 3 kilograms of cash. That's the law. The moon's coming out tonight, the sun's coming out tomorrow. That's the law. So when you start to think about the voluminous amount of cash that gets generated from, say, 100 kilograms of cocaine would generate 300 kilograms of cash, you can see that it becomes quite an avalanche of greenbacks. So my agency and my team focus primarily on the currency. And we pose as money launderers and money brokers to the Cali and Medellin drug cartels.
How dangerous of a job is that in reality? Because, Hollywood and TV make it look very dangerous, and I have no doubt that it is. Um, from a street perspective, someone who really beat the streets and did this, how nervous are you about going home every night?
Well, the cartel put a contract on me in 1990, myself and my partner. Um, you know, as you know from your own experiences, people get killed for a heck of a whole lot less than what we were dealing with. And the currency is the end game. It's the reason why there's corruption, the reason why there's transportation, there's cultivation, there's bribery, there's sales. It's all to generate income. And when you intercede or intercept on the currency side of the equation, you negate all of that. So it was a classic case of like it being extremely dangerous, but not fully understanding the danger because you're in the middle of it. It's when you get out of it and you look back at it, it's kind of like standing in the eye of a hurricane. The eye of a hurricane is very calm. It's everything that swirls around it. And when you come out of that lifestyle and you look back at it, you're like, hey, man, what was I thinking?
I can only imagine um, going through some of the stuff you had to go through and playing your cards just right, knowing there's these guys out there, they're criminals, they have no intention of doing good things. And would they take my life in an instant, like in order to protect theirs? Like, I mean, it's very much like that being in the military, when you're at war, because, you know that these guys do not like you. But you're in their backyard, you know what I mean? Whereas you're on your home turf. I mean, you lived there in Miami-Dade County, right? And I mean, you're right there at home.
Yeah. The ideology of war is that, you go into that equation understanding what your role clearly defined is. And in our situation, you're dealing with the product that everyone desires and you're taking it from them. Therefore, you're putting them at risk and you're putting them in jeopardy. So they would have there's no allegiance or loyalty or you're my brother in the drug world. Um, there is none. Uh, Country boundaries are just dotted lines on a map. Everything is geopolitical, everything flows, everything's transnational. And when you take the money, you upset a lot of people. And
Sure.
it's not a pleasant thing. I mean, it wasn't unpleasant for us who were seizing currency, but for those who we seized currency from, some of them met a very untimely demise.
Tell me about that contract that was put on you by the cartel. Or tell me what you can.
Well, what I can tell you is that in 1990, myself and my team seized 26 million dollars from the Medellin cartel, and the Coral Gables Police Department was the agency of record. So the cartel pretty much assumed that there were Coral Gables people attached to this case. So it wasn't so much I'm going to go get Jeff. It was more of a case of those guys from the Gables, those two guys that are part of this drug task force. We're going to put something on them. And it wasn't like it came to us kind of through the U.S. Attorney's office. It was like, hey, we got this information. What do you want to do about it? We just were like, we're in full go mode. Nothing's really going to change. We've already made this huge seizure. We're on to other cases now. Let's just run with it, see how it goes.
So, who else did you work with during your career? Because I see that you're a certified DEA instructor. Did you work with a lot of federal agencies? I mean, considering the
Uh,
location you're at, and being that close to, the sea and international waters and all that, who else did you really have interactions with?
I, I couldn't name them all. The major players that I saw on a day-to-day basis were the DEA, U.S. Customs Service, occasionally the IRS. They didn't play really nice with everybody.
They don't, do they?
But no, but I mean the Royal Bahamian Police, New York State Police, New York City Police, Argentine Federal Police, Mexican Police, Houston, Texas, Los Angeles, RNSP in Los Angeles. I mean, really, I worked with a lot of people, but mostly it was U.S. Customs and DEA, and we were actually we started out as the United States Customs Task Force, and then over a couple of years we morphed into a DEA task force.
Hmm. What's one of the craziest things that happened to you in your career working narcotics?
Wow, um, that question catches me off guard because it's really a matter of severity and what you perceive to be crazy. Could be normal to me or not normal to me. Um,
What's crazy to
Crazy.
you?
I wouldn't call this crazy. I mean, I'm sure that tonight around 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll think of something, then I'll have to call you and wake you up. But off the top of my head, I do remember one guy had come in. We had been watching him, and he had come up on our, in our travels. We'd come across him, and but we were so busy working other cases, we couldn't really devote a lot of time to him. We knew he was moving currency through Miami, and he came into the office one day and he said, I want to be an informant for the United States Customs Service. So myself and the customs agent sat down with him, and he began to tell us all the things he can do for us and what the percentage would be for every seizure we made, what we need to pay him, and everything else. And we listened very politely to him, and then we told him, after about 45 minutes of him talking, hey man, you live here, you drive this car, your kids go to school here, your wife goes here. And he was like stunned. And what had happened was he was moving currency for two different drug factions. And he started skimming off of one. And then when that person figured out that he was skimming, he started skimming off the second guy to try to recoup the money he was taking from the other side. And then he got in trouble with both of them. So thought he would come to us. He would give us some very low level bottom feeders, make some commissions off of us, and then he would be able to pay off both of those two guys and be in good stead. But when we told him we wouldn't play with him, he really didn't have a card left in the deck to play. And then about 4 weeks later, he had got a bad case of window cancer, and he fell out of an 8-story Bogota hotel room and died.
So he fell, huh? That's the
He fell.
oh man. So that leads me into kind of another question, which I think you sort of kind of just answered. Are these cartels as dangerous and violent and ruthless as we hear the stories about?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to recognize that there's so much money coming in and there's so much control over different transit routes, distribution channels, warehouses, stash houses, businesses, legitimate businesses being created from this currency. So this currency can destabilize other currencies in smaller nations and help swing economic growth or economic, stymie economic um, growth in that country. They can sway political campaigns. So these people become very powerful. They become very bold and empowered, and they can own after a while as they start to buy and bribe judges and juries and attorneys and police chiefs and things, they become even more powerful. And the sky is the limit. So and it's not just, drug cartels. You see it going on in the European theater right now and everything else. I mean, all these all these conflicts are being funded by somebody somewhere.
Was there ever a moment in your career where you saw something that absolutely took your breath away and that actually shocked you and said, this kind of one upped everything? I mean, because I'm sure you've seen corruption and payments to certain political parties and judges and
You
political
know,
figures. Is there something that really stood out that made you just go, "Wow"?
once again, I'm sure to be a bigger story to tell, but one that comes to mind right now off the top of my head is I remember I had a local big time attorneys in Miami who would come to me and say, hypothetically, if I were to have a client who was involved in illicit currency transactions, what would it take for that client to work with you before you go after them? And I would say, well, if I know you have attorney client privilege, but if you're telling me something's going on, and what would happen eventually is these high powered attorneys would start brokering their clients to us as informants.
Wow.
And I saw how justice really is blind in many ways.
What would be your one piece of advice to someone today who wanted to go into law enforcement and narcotics and really try to like make a difference in that kind of that world, that corruption?
Understand your limits and recognize that there are things you're going to understand, and there's going to be parts of this portrait that you're not going to be able to paint. And also recognize that you're going to be challenged in some ways that are going to challenge your morals. They're going to challenge your integrity. They're going to challenge your conviction. And, stay in your frame and recognize that this is a small part of your life. You're going to do 25, 30 years, and then you're going to move on. Um, put your head on your pillow at night and feel comfortable about what you did and what you do, and recognize that you can only do so much.
I think that's really good advice. So you retired from law enforcement, 27 years. Now you're a technical advisor and kind of like an experience advisor for pictures and television. What kind of projects have you worked on?
Yeah, as a technical advisor, I worked on some projects for NBC, A&E, some independent films. What the technical advisor often does is they work with the director, they work with the actors, they work with sometimes the stunt coordinator, definitely the director of photography, and they try to help the script, the plot, the actors to come across as realistic as they can. Um, Sometimes on the fly, directors or actors will ask you, "Would I really say it like this?" And you go, "No, no, you wouldn't. You would say it like this," and then they change the script right then and there. It's the audiences are becoming a lot more sophisticated, and those who have any bit of experience will recognize right away that, oh, that weapon that wasn't around in that year, and that chamber wasn't, that round wasn't chambered correctly, and you wouldn't wear your badge on your hip in that way. And so the technical advisor's job is to try to make it as realistic and authentic as they can, but you have to also recognize that it's entertainment too. So sometimes actors are going to be asked by the director to do things that you wouldn't normally do in real life, but they need a Jeopardy moment. It is still entertainment, so you have to walk that fine line between realism and entertainment.
Any specific projects that you've worked on that we might be familiar with? We've seen on streaming services or anything?
On streaming services, I worked on the 11 on A&E. I also worked on a NBC Universal TV show called Gone about an FBI task force that looks for missing people. Um, did a couple other feature films that didn't really go very far in the theater, but most 95% of films don't ever go very far in the movie theater anyway. I think that we as a viewing audience sometimes think like every movie is going to run for 19, 20 weeks at your local theater. And sometimes movies are designed to go right to the cruise ship industry, right to Indonesia, right to South Africa, and you're never going to see them again. They're designed to, make money and to be seen, but whether or not they are Academy Award categories, that's not really what they're made for. So those are the things that I've worked on so far.
I see that along with being an advisor, you've also done some production yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, I got a producing credit for a movie called The Cuban. It's totally unrelated to anything we're talking about here. It's a feel-good movie about love and music, and we were very fortunate to get a great cast and great director and a great musical score. And Lou Gossett Jr. Was in the film, and it did quite well. But it came out just around COVID, so a lot of people truthfully didn't get an opportunity to see it. But it's out there. It's pretty good.
Where can they go see it at?
Anywhere. I mean, all of your major streaming services have it.
Okay, nice. So when you retired, you started going into entertainment essentially. But the biggest part of this kind of after retirement thing has been books, and you converted over to a fiction author, and you have these Cade Taylor novels. Um, Tell us a little bit about Cade Taylor, and then we'll get into the newest book.
Yeah, I had a lot of people tell me for years that I should write a book, and I should write a book, I should write a book. And I didn't really want to do a tell-all, and I really didn't want to, you know, do that whole, and that's when Johnny pulled a gun and killed a guy. I didn't want to do that. That just wasn't where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So I created a fictional character named Cade Taylor. He's a vice intelligence narcotic detective in Miami, much like I was. And Cade is fictional, but the thing about my book series, the Cade Taylor book series, is that everything in the books is authentic. The restaurants they go to, the streets they drive on, the places they go are very authentic. And there's a lot of research that's done when they go into a restaurant and order something. It's not just like, oh, they ordered such and such a meal. I truthfully research the menu and find an entree from the menu. I check title charts. If I say there was a Miami Dolphin game playing that day, there really was one playing that day. So it's almost as if, and the books are written in first person, so it's almost as if you're with Cade Taylor
Okay.
as he's going through these cases. And there isn't a situation where Cade works one day and then 6 weeks later the case picks up again. You go to bed with him, you wake up with him, and you go through this entire ordeal with him from start to finish. I think that we both understand now, Jeff. We both understand that, that today's audiences and today's readers are much more engrossed, are much more engaged in their content. And if I said, well, Jeff and I went to Chicago and we found this great steakhouse, and then, Jeff ordered a steak, and I had, no, well, why was it so great? Why were you in Chicago? How did you get there? What happened? And the audiences want that. So I write, since I worked in cinema, I write from a cinematic point of view and very descriptive. And Miami, where these books are set, is almost as big a character as Cade Taylor is himself, because everywhere he goes, everything he does is 100% authentic and real. There's no Maple Street, Elm Street, Turn Down,
Yeah.
Spruce Street. These are real streets. These are real buildings he walks into. And Miami, like New York City, like Los Angeles, like Chicago, you may not live there, but you've at least traveled there. And this helps to elicit some memory and some understanding of where you've been or an area that you know.
Did you always write in the first person, or how did you kind of get started in writing, and how did you settle on first person?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Um,
That's fair.
I'm writing a book now that's a narrative driven piece, and it's a little difficult. Not difficult, it's different than what I'm used to doing. But Cade is written in the first person, and you're seeing this case through his optics. And once again, because it's the first person, many readers feel like they're right next to him as he goes through this. And the thing about these Cade Taylor books is that I'm bringing a sense of law enforcement and police procedural work that many people don't know about or see. So it's almost like as if while you were living your life, while you're at the traffic light waiting for the red light to change, Cade's in the car next to you and he has a world of trouble going on. You just don't know it. It's as if while you're living your life, all this craziness is going on. You're just not aware of it. Now you're being brought into it.
That's cool because I think a lot of times we assume when we see a police officer out on patrol driving down the road, oh, he's just out driving around, patrolling, you know, looking for trouble potentially, and we don't really know what's going on in his mind. What's squawking on the radio? What's going on in the cab of that car, or what he just came from, or he or she came from? So I think that's interesting because I think the general public we assume when we see a police officer driving down the road, they're just out driving around because that's part of patrolling. And we don't think about that deeper context of where they just came from or what they have going on right now, what they're thinking. Because is in your experience, being in a car, you're going from A to B. You're probably thinking of a million different things, and like you said, Cade Taylor's got a bunch of chaos going on. How do you bring that kind of to real life from your experience to kind of fill that gap so that when the reader reads it, like if I read it, I go, oh my gosh, I never even thought that, I'm at a red light, I'm waiting to get home, and he's waiting to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I think that the magic elixir to bring that all together is to bring the reader into an engagement with Cade and also bring the reader into an understanding that there's a whole aspect, a whole genre of law enforcement that you're just not exposed to. I mean, 15, 20 minutes earlier into the conversation, you asked me about, how is money portrayed in Hollywood stuff. And like I said, Hollywood's just catching up. This is a whole part of the equation that people don't really understand. And this is what Cade's dealing with. Cade's dealing with large cocaine cases. He's dealing with large money laundering cases. He's dealing with informants, nefarious people, uh, corruption, and he has to wade through all of this. And it's a big. His whole life is kind of a morass. And starting with the first book, which the debut novel was called Trust No One, on to four more novels, we see Cade evolve a little bit in the sense that these four novels take place in the course of 1 year. I mean, he's having one heck of a year.
Wow.
And we see him kind of morph along, but yet the elements of what he does, the synergy of what he's dealing with never changes. The toys in the toy box always stay the same. He's just dealing with them differently each and every book.
How important is character arc over several books? Because like I'm working with my editor now, that was one of the biggest questions that he asked me was, where do you want to see your character go over the next couple of books? What do they want? What do they need? And what are you going to give them? How important is character arc for you?
It's important in the sense that your reader doesn't want to be stuck in some sort of time limbo. But, the arc can't be like incredible revelation. He can't go from 0 to 60. It has to be an incremental change. And the reader wants to see him evolve, but the reader also has to recognize that trajectory is not always upward.
Yes.
Sometimes trajectory is downward. So in Cade Taylor's case, we start off in Trust No One, and he is besieged emotionally at the bottom of his well over acrimonious divorce, and now he's got this crazy environment where a lot of his drug informants are being killed, and he's dealing with all of this. And then as we move along, we see that the divorce still hurts, but it's not the focal point of what's always on his mind. He's evolving a little bit throughout the four books, but he's still holding on to the things that make him what he is, and that's what sets him apart from what else is going on around him. Is he has a very good sense of who he is. He's a little sardonic. He's got a good wit. He's very street smart, and he learns to play this game well. Now, When people go to police academy, they learn the elements of burglary. They learn how to make a traffic stop. They learn how to fill out a lost property receipt. No one teaches you how to be a drug trafficker or a money launderer. So Cade has had to, pioneer his way through this new persona. For in this case, he's been doing it for 9 years, and he's very good at it. But it comes with a toll, and you see the marks upon him. I mean, fairy tales will often say to you, "Oh, I want a knight in shining armor." That's not the knight you want. He's not battle tested. You want the guy or the woman who's got chinks in their armor, got a couple dents and some scrapes because they've been in the fray. And this is where Cade Taylor steps in. He's been in the fray, but he maintains his sense of his core values and his sense of right and wrong.
So the first book was Trust No One. The second book
Yes.
was Grasping Smoke.
Yes.
The third is One More Move, and the newest one, which is out already or coming out,
Came out last week.
came out
Choices and
last week.
Chances.
So here in February, Choices and Chances, the fourth Cade Taylor novel. Tell me, you can spoiler it if you want to. So we'll just say spoiler alert, but tell us a little bit about Choices and Chances.
Well, I'm not going to spoil it. I'll just say that in Choices and Chances, every one of these four books can stand alone. Um, it's ideal if you read them in order because you'll see the little nuances that go through each book. There's a thread that runs through all four of them. Supporting characters pretty much stay in all four books. In the latest Cade Taylor novel, Choices and Chances, Cade is dragged into a pretty grisly homicide and has to try to help homicide detective solve this case, all at the same time dealing with an interfering federal agent who is getting in the way of him and jeopardizing his relationship with the DEA and with his own police department.
Mm. So, where is Cade Taylor going in the future? What's the future plans? And do you have any other writing plans?
Yeah, I think I'll never finish with Cade Taylor, but I've already started another book that involves a detective in Los Angeles. And he is, it's kind of, it's kind of paranormal, psychological thriller. It's a totally different vehicle than what the Cade Taylor books are. This will hopefully give myself, the author, a chance to retool, reconnect, and regroove my way through things. It'll also hopefully give the readers a chance to catch up with the four Cade Taylor novels that are out there. Um, I don't think we've seen the end of Cade Taylor. We're just going to park him for a little bit for now while we do this next project.
Very cool. So, let me ask you this. Just kind of, I'm going to use it as a clip here to help promote the podcast. What was your first big bust like as a narcotics detective?
I think their first big bust was the seizure of $24 million. I think in today's world, we hear about professional athletes being signed for large contracts, and we've kind of come numb to a figure like that. But when you actually see it, physically see it, it's daunting. It's as one of the local newscasters said when they reported the case, it's vulgar. She said it's a vulgar amount of money. Um, it's almost incomprehensible to myself, the average person, when you see it in its totality laid out in front of you.
So 24 million in cash laying on
Cash.
probably multiple tables.
Yeah, it filled up the U.S. Customs Service did a press release with the DEA, and it filled up an entire width of a large hotel ballroom. Uh,
Wow.
table to table to table to table, just stacked and like that. And then in smaller cases, I think one of the funny things was we seized $6.8 million one time. And at the time, Nicholas Brady was the U.S. Treasurer. of the United States, and he was in Miami. So the politicians, the bigwigs, the law enforcement agencies, they grabbed him and said, "You got to come see this." So they drove him out to the scene, and I'm standing there, and in comes the U.S. Treasurer, and he's looking at the $6.8 million. He's looking at it all. And I'm like, your signature's on one of these bills somewhere. It's like, yeah. That's a little bit of an irony there. Yeah.
That is
So
irony, and that's kind of it's funny because you sit there and go, "Golly, am I part of the problem?" And the answer is, "Well, you're a politician, so probably."
yeah, yeah.
But
That's the other thing. Also, when it comes to dealing in these large cases, you often do ask yourself, "Are you part of the problem? Or are you part of the solution?"
well, like the military, I'm sure there's politics. You
Well,
start to deal with that at some point in time, regardless of how hard you try not to.
in the first couple chapters of the book, One More Move with Cade Taylor, he's sitting in a car and he's recognizing that he's going to walk in to meet these guys to purchase some kilograms of cocaine with currency that was seized. And he's saying to himself, if we didn't seize this money and take it out of our property room, we wouldn't have the money to buy the cocaine, and then the cocaine wouldn't be sold. He goes, we're kind of like perpetuating this cycle ourselves. We're kind of self-generating this situation, and he's kind of having a moral moment where he's wondering, like, am I part of the solution or am I part of the problem?
Mm. Is that and that's a did you draw from real experience for that?
All four books. You see me doing this a lot because above me are all the framed, large
Yeah.
uh, book covers. All four books are, they're life and art imitate each other a lot. And I get the few people who know me who read the books will say to me, "Hey, I'm reading your book, and I'm on page 119," and I'll go, "Oh, okay. I'm on 119." I go, I don't know what that means. You got to tell me what's happening. Oh, okay. All right. You just did this and you just did that. And I'll go, it's not me. It's Cade Taylor. And they go, nah, I know, but it's you. So I get a lot of that coalesce of how much is you and how much is Cade Taylor. And I get asked that quite a lot. And, I'm going to pull the old Robin Masters on that one and just let you decide for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's the fun part about it is when, especially like a lot of these authors in the military fiction, thriller, law enforcement genre, who have these backgrounds like what you do, and like Jack Carr is a Navy SEAL, and you kind of go, where does the character stop and the author start? And it's just kind of fun to kind of fictionalize and kind of understand what that is. And I think it's cool because it's cool when life does imitate art because it kind of puts it in perspective. Like, well, maybe it isn't so close to fiction. Maybe these things really did happen to Michael while he was on. He was on duty during his career, and it kind of makes you go, the world is a lot more dangerous and sketchy and bigger than we thought it was.
Yeah. And you mentioned Jack. Jack's becoming a juggernaut, but it's very obvious that Jack draws from his life, his previous life, and he has intimate knowledge of that life. I'm very similar. The only difference I think is that my reading audience is not as when I say they're not sophisticated, I mean is that the military audience is very unforgiving.
Hmm.
An author like Jack Carr is going to be very careful what he writes because someone will call you out on
Oh yeah.
the most minute thing, and he does an excellent job of it. He's doing quite well, and I have a lot of respect for him. Um, People really don't understand what we used to do in the vice narcotic world and in the VIN world. So I'm actually bringing this to them, oftentimes for the first time, and they've actually coined the terminology "dark tropics" as a genre that I'm writing because we all think about Miami as being sunshine and nightclubs and neon and stuff, and Cade Taylor is dealing in the more grittier side of Miami and South Florida. And the second book, titled "Grasp and Smoke," is actually a term that we've used in criminal profiling, which is where you can see it but you can't really get your hands around it. So it's as elusive as grasping smoke. And
Mm,
Cade is in that book challenged with a case that he can understand it, but he can't get his hands around it.
that's interesting. I love that you're bringing this world in. And you're bringing to light something different that people maybe don't know. Before I let you go, where can people find more about you and kind of stay in touch and pick up the books and get the latest?
Um, the World Wide Web is vast. There's michaelhearns.com. All the books can be linked or purchased from there. My biography's there. Obviously, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, your independent bookstores. They may not have it on their shelf, but they can get it for you. It sells worldwide. You just have to ask for it. So the best way to find things is michaelhearns.com. And then if not that, your local favorite bookstore, your local favorite e-retailer. All four books are in hardcover, paperback, and e-version. So there should be a format for everybody who wants it.
Fantastic. Well, Michael, it was a pleasure, man. This went by quick. Thanks for letting me pick
Okay.
your brain and talk books with you.
Yeah,
And man, I
man.
wish you the best of luck on the release and future releases. And I'll be sure to stay in touch and we'll do this again.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been my pleasure. Really.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.